resources look like, but take us through that journey.
Okay, so without giving my age away, I have been been part of the community for a while, but actively I was working at Incognito. That was my first introduction really to this whole entire life, and in that space, I got to see so much. Like I got to see the interactions of people and things like that, and I grew in there. It kind of groomed me. It was this space for me to have where I felt like I exist and I was
Mm,
seen. And as I think as I progressed and became an entertainer and stuff, you start developing your own social circle in your support
yeah,
circle. And I was realizing that I had a bunch of people around me that when people would say they were your friends, I was like, that's not my friends, that's my family.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the emphasis we House of Capri, which is my first home, my forever home, my life, my name. I wouldn't be nowhere if it wasn't for House of Capri. And that just was this area where we all came together to take care of each other. And in that sense, we started. It was my me creating a space for my family to take care of other families and other family members, if that makes sense. So we started
hmm
things like AIDS Walk, working with AIDS Foundation Houston and Legacy, doing fundraisers and doing AIDS benefit shows, doing something different outside of that. The one thing I wanted to paint to them, like, this wasn't a gay house. This was my real family. I couldn't be, even though trans was not a word, I could not be a gay house mother because I'm not gay. So that
yeah,
was family, and I didn't want gender identity or sexual orientation to be that thing, that invisible prison. So if you start treating people and raising people and that's like, what is your real life? What is your human capital? What is your investment in self? And that was those areas. And as I progressed,
yeah,
I started noticing that a lot of trans people weren't getting their name changed and were having problems navigating services. I am very research. I research everything and I'll go talk to people. So I start seeing my inbox being repeated with the same questions and questions, and I was like, well, there is no, why isn't there a space for trans people to ask these questions or to get this? So I started creating it. Save Our Sisters United originally started off with Save Our Sisters, which was something that me and Dana Roxanne or Roxanne Collins thought about. And
yeah,
we start having these little, I call them social mixers, because I don't believe in using the word support groups because of the stigma that African Americans and people of color have with mental health. And I wanted to
hmm
be a space of welcoming and existing. So we've been going strong 4 years, and as we have progressed, we have opened up that space more for our trans men, and looking forward to opening up to other trans variations under the umbrella.
awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to go back to one of the things that you said, family, because that hits home with me so much. And it also really just made me think about the way that others think of that word family. And I've always heard it, throughout the community itself, where it's like, you get to choose your family. And you get to really see who you want to be around and who you want to call family, right? You have your given family, and then you have your chosen family, right? And I think family for me is someone that's going to support you no matter what, and be there for you and be that rock. But what you said specifically really made me think, if like, for someone in the trans community, um, yeah, not saying it's the gay family or the gay house, because you made a really good point. You're not gay, right? And so it is something that I, to be honest, didn't even think about until you said that right there. So I think it's great to understand the perspective that others have around the word just utilizing the word family, but understand that we all have a given family and we all have a chosen family. And that chosen family, I think, really comes into play of how someone gets to that next step, that support, kind of roots them to be successful in life. So thank you for sharing that.
I think one thing to point out why that is probably something that people don't probably think of is because think about the evolution of language. As you heard me
hmm
say, trans wasn't a word for me. So the only thing, even trans men were, I mean, trans people were grouped into that of either lesbian or gay men.
hmm
So it was
hmm
just a thing. So of course they would use that term gay to identify the house because they're looking at the orientation when gender identity wasn't even a conversation at that moment.
I agree with you 100%. And an example of that, even on my side, was with my company. For the longest time, we were utilizing the word gleam at Microsoft, where it was gay, lesbian employees at Microsoft. And we started that back in the early 90s, and 93, 92 is when we had our first Gleam group, our employee resource group. And then over the years, when more started coming around for different spectrums of the community, that's when we started getting challenged of, why are we still using just gay and lesbian? There's so many others that are not being represented, and that's where we came down to global LGBTQ plus employees at Microsoft. So we still utilize the word GLEAM, or the acronym GLEAM, but we're recognizing more individuals in the spectrum as we go along. So it's always a good learn for us.
I mean, that's a good thing. I don't tell anyone to feel guilty about that, because society evolves. And it's just that we have to make sure we are in those positions of evolving with that society.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the next thing that I would like to go through is, we hear a lot of things happening within the trans community that is, quite frankly, disturbing. And it's something that is, to me at least, one of those where I hear the trans community needs our help and our resources, but we're just not seeing a lot of resources and help come to for the trans community. So what is your, when it comes down to our perspectives and stuff, what are some of the resources and things that we can do as individuals to help support the trans community?
The first thing I always said, that if you ever want to be a good ally to a trans person, there are 2 P's I ask you to do. Is be personal, learn our personal stories, and then be present.
Yeah.
Meaning that just because you know my story and you're not present there, that means there's an imbalance. I need those things to balance. So when it comes to the needs of trans people, and mind you, I'm not the total representation of trans. I am a representation of trans in Houston. I've just been afforded the opportunity to carry the narratives of others. I always say that we need to think about, if you work in law offices, how to help people with legal services, how to help those with who need name changes, gender markers, and stuff like that, how to take that expense off of trans people. Or if you know that they're dealing with shelter and you work in an area where you know that there is shelter that could be trans friendly, and providing that information or advocating for it in that space. So, or if you're looking, it's so many things. If you know that there's protection needed. Like for me, I feel like at this moment we're seeing the highest already in this year. We've already got to the number of last year deaths of trans people. Murders, not deaths. Let's say murders. Okay? And yet people are still saying we have to beg them for protection or for human rights or for our human rights. That is a sad thing. So when you see that advocating for these spaces, we do need protections, because even if you did not want to see me as a trans individual, I am a human first, and I am still rightfully owed those rights as human rights.
Yes.
So those things of going in those spaces and identifying while you're in those spaces, being present and personal, that you start seeing the needs is, because not every trans person has the same narrative. I think that we've gotten caught up at looking at trans people as victim, and people making us feel like because we're victims because we're trans, and that's like, I'm over that. There's no victim here. What it is a bunch of disproportion, discrimination, judgment, stigma that is weighed on our shoulders and has been there forever. But it is our trans bodies that has laid all these stones for y'all to be able to walk along. And I was like, there's no longer a need for that. So the thing is that our needs are every needs that a human being will need. Making sure that you have these job ready skills, making sure that you help us with resume writing, finding that fit for that, or being that support system to walk with a person into an agency where they feel nervous, where it's not really friendly.
Yeah. And going back to just last year was the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and making sure we don't forget that history either, of how Pride was a riot and then turned into what it is today, because of 2 trans women, right? And I think that's one of the things where, even going through last year when we had our panel for Pride, it was to a lot of people who came up to me after our panel. They said, you know what, thank you for the education, because I didn't even know that even existed or how that even started. So understanding our history itself and knowing where it all started and how it's, where it stemmed from, helps along the way.
I think it's not just knowing the history, but respecting the history.
Hmm.
I think that's what the problem is. A lot of people know the history. We just don't respect the history. And the
Hmm.
thing is that, like, if you think about it, the way that we even introduced gender identity into this word, I mean, into the world, was with a group of sexual orientations where you devalue
Hmm.
the value of my gender identity. So you may
Hmm.
one thing that is going to be fetishized, but I can't be a bunch of other things, under that. Like, so when people sit here and they speak about Marsha and everything that was forefront, to me it is hurtful. And
Hmm.
I kind of take it personally that you still hear this narrative that these women started this, and yet y'all still feel like we have to beg y'all to exist, to be in spaces, to be that, or that
Hmm.
we have to be accepted for you to say you validate our womanhood or something. Or it's just
Hmm.
so much that goes in that could be hurtful. And I speak in this message because that though a lot of people may not speak up and be like that, but visually we are attacking trans people when we skip over their history and not respect their history. Like talking about it does nothing
Yeah.
for you if you're not going to respect it after the talk.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very powerful. I agree. You gotta. It's more than just talking and saying that you're gonna stand up for something. It's the action aspect of it, like being able to be within the community, going out to the events of our within our even our own community. We've had a conversation about this as a gay man. I'm not the best, I would say. All the time when it comes to supporting all the other letters within our community. And it's one of those where I'm working as a gay man to support my brothers and sisters throughout the spectrum in their events, whether it's in the lesbian community, the bi community, the trans community. How do I show up for them and ask and be an ally for you all before I even go outside my community and ask somebody else to be an ally for our community? And I think that's where this past year has been a real reflection of where we are as a community and how we can really support each other.
So when I hear definitely that, I always think about all these events and everything, and people wonder why you don't see trans people at trans events and this and that. Let's talk about the history of abuse and being misused. Okay,
Hmm.
we were tokenized in so many spaces to get that number to meet a grant, but then after that number was met for that grant, it was over. We weren't invited. Are you are you are you paid trans women in Amazon gift cards when you know that they have the highest number of homelessness
Yeah.
and food insecurity? That can't pay a bill for me. Are
Hmm.
you bring them into these spaces to help come up and speak on these things and help you create these trainings, but yet you don't want to pay them. It's
Hmm.
stuff like that where the community that we are a part of, that we help, that we mothered, we forefather, and all that thing is the one
Hmm.
thing that took advantage of us the most. They have made
Hmm.
it that we, as trans people, that we have to walk in a room and spend 5 minutes or more explaining our existence for somebody that's not going to be in that space with me no more than 2 minutes. So
Yeah.
like, so the thing is that a medical term now introduces me when I walk into the room. When I don't see them say there go bipolar Betty or a suicide Sue, not making fun or anything. What I'm saying is that a trans person, when they walk into that room, the first thing people is that trans. Or when someone introduces us, they'll say we're trans, not realizing that you're outing me. I am
Yeah.
more things than trans. I promise you I'm more things than trans. And my debt does not come in and say, oh, you have trans debt. It's debt just like yours.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point. When someone might be thinking that they're doing the right thing, or they might be feeling like they're supporting, but they really need to take themselves out of it and understand the other person before they start speaking about that person's life, just to ensure, one, like you said, they're not outing them. And I think that's one thing that slips a lot of people's mind is whether they've informed you or not, or whether they informed you at all, if they are transitioning or they are part of the community, doesn't give you the right to, say that for them, unless that permission's already been given by the individual.
Well, first of all, it's an honor if anybody invites you into how their authentic self. I think that's
Hmm.
one thing we need to respect. Two,
Mm-hmm.
when I started this, and I'm sure when a lot of trans people start, I wasn't thinking about, oh, I'm gonna fight for gay men, lesbian men, bi
Mm-hmm.
tribe, anything. I was fighting for a human person. I did not
Mm-hmm.
want them taken advantage. So at that point, I went into this without looking at gender identity or sexual orientation on that. If I saw somebody that needed my help, I was there. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of trans people and all this that we have created. But yet, when it comes into that space of reversing that and looking at and giving us our rightful dues, that is not there. So
Yeah.
it's just like there's a history of abuse that we have to correct within our own houses before we could really even expect the people outside the door to even respect us. Like, it's just, I'm not calling about, it's just real. And as
Mm-hmm.
try to discredit people trans the spirit, oh, y'all making this up and this and that or whatever. No, 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 no. You are welcome to feel whichever way you want to feel about my trans experience and any other person's trans experience, but you do not get to govern my steps,
Mm-hmm.
and you do not think that I have to still stand there and respect you putting the barriers up against me so that you could look a little bit more better. No.
Yeah. No, and that's real talk right there. I think that is straight up real talk that a lot of people need to have, just because no one challenges, no one is there to, call it out like it is, or call the BS out, or just say, you know what, take a step back. It's not about you. It's about the community and us coming together and supporting each other. I don't want to skip over the discrimination aspect. I want to go back to, what type of discrimination you and your community have had over these, I would say, just in the past 6 months, let alone a year.
I want to go back further. Let's go back to when there was an ordinance that says that if you did not have on one article of your birth clothing, that you would go to jail as a trans person.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start there. It didn't stop you from being harassed by law enforcement. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
stop them from parading you and doing disrespectful things in front of others when you were in those jail systems. When you go into these places of jobs, when you want to utilize the restroom that you identify, it does not
Yeah.
stop you from doing that. It didn't stop with this, what I call employment entrapment. When you know that a trans person has had a struggle finding employment, and you knowingly know this and you use that against them to some degree to be manipulative and do other things in that workspace. So
Yeah.
that's another conversation we're not talking about. It's
Mm-hmm.
so many things. Like, I'm gonna tell you, as a 40 plus trans person and a parent, that at
And you
some
looking good, by the way.
thank you, babe. I have put on a lot of weight for this. But no, I think, as what I would say is that I wake up every morning and I say to myself, I'll be damned if you're gonna move me out the way. If
Mm-hmm.
God wanted me to bend down and kiss your rear end, bow down to you, He would have made me 6'3". I can't
Yep.
fit it. So what I'm saying is that I'm here for a purpose, and I'm going to shake up that. So when you hear this discrimination, I was like, we only sit here and talk about work discrimination. We talk about employee discrimination. We speak about that, but let's go to some small parts of what we do as discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, we always want to go so major, but yet we scratching surfaces, but we're not even scratching because we haven't
Yeah.
even started putting one area. I feel personally that the conversation around trans people is too PC, because right now in the conversations is top on tier. When it comes to care, wellness, and protection and all that, it's a bottom. There is a big gray space, and until that big gray space is filled
Mm-hmm.
and merged with the proper things, I won't be having PC conversations for nobody.
Yeah.
I promise you I won't. Because the thing is, not only am I trans, I'm black. So there's other
Mm-hmm.
things that go on into that.
Yep.
So
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I want to kind of point out in that conversation is within our own community and the discrimination that we're not talking about, or I really don't hear. And you let me know if you hear, if it's different on your side, but I really don't hear people talk about the discrimination within our own community, um, towards trans people, towards lesbians, towards bisexuals, towards, the gay community. And so let's dive into that a little bit. What
well,
are
I
some of the
mean,
things?
are you really expecting to hear that? Think about it.
No,
Yeah.
well, to be honest, yeah, to be honest, um, it's one of those where, do you expect it to hear? No, absolutely not. And the reason why I don't expect to hear it is because a lot of us are within the community. We're fighting for equal justice and we're fighting for equal rights. How are we going to discriminate somebody who is a part of our community trying to fight for the same things that we're trying to fight for.
And
And it happens, right? And of course, the stigmas that go around within each community. And now, as we're going through this new, I would even say, cancel culture, or just generation of not saying the right thing or saying the wrong thing can land you in hot water. It's more of understanding the facts and understanding that, hey, this is what happened. This is not like a myth, or this is not a tale that I'm telling. This is something that within our community we see throughout the spectrum of our community. How do we, like, where do we start, and how do we turn that around?
okay, first, this is where we're going to first start. When you're sitting in these little groups and we having these little cocktails and you start hearing them laughing and making fun of trans people, if you do not correct them in that space and call them out on it, you are part of the problem. So if
Yeah.
that is not corrected in those small subsets, it cannot be corrected in those bigger subsets. Because what it is, all I did was went and put on a coat jacket to go to work, but I'm still that same person that was down here talking crazy about people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there is this thing that, I don't know what I really don't know, but I will say this. I think that there is always a struggle to try to disarm trans people for wanting what they want. I feel like that we act like we're starving, like other identities or orientations are starving, in that sense that if they give us any ounce of respect as a human being or what's rightfully ours, it takes away from them. It does not work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't, because it has been these trans women and parents that have mothered half of the GLB community and shaped them, gave them homes. I know definitely my house has been full with people. But at that same token, if we don't, it has been a mockery. Think about it. It's been a mockery. We were considered men dressing up in dresses. And then the sad part is that I have seen gay men say all this and respect a trans woman, but the moment they get mad at her, they call her a gay, a punk in a dress, or a man in a dress. So to me, that means you never really respected me in that beginning. You follow me? So it's just a bunch of
Your
things.
true colors come out.
Yeah, so I think we walk in the room trying to understand people's intentions. And that is an exhausting job, to try to figure out every person's intentions when you interact with them. So when you see the trans people backing up, or they not want to come into these spaces that are said created for them, it's because of that same abuse. We know that who wants to be herded in a room and then looked at and gawk at and then have to explain all your trans experience, explain your bad time. And then it's like when you tell a person you don't have, like, I never sex work, or I don't have this boohoo story that they want me to have, I become invalid. My trans experience becomes invalid. So my thing is, are we really wanting to help trans people in the realness? Or we really want to collect trans people's sad stories so that we could use them to make money and collect and fundraise for it, and yet they still have these stories and nothing is being put in place to help them?
Yeah. And again, continue on with that real talk. And I would say the listen aspect of it, as someone who and we've talked about this, like being able to just listen to what your story is and your journey, because having a diverse group of friends really makes your perspective change in so many different ways, compared to just having, let's say, all, in my case, all Hispanic, friends, or, all white, gay friends, or one subgroup, just having everybody in that group the same, right? Being able to expand and get to know someone in the trans community, not just because it's a box checked, to have, a diverse friend. It is to really understand how you, as an individual, as a human, can be a better support factor, and even, provide resources. Who knows that, you work at a company that provides all these resources that could help this individual, right, this human, and you rather, keep it for yourself, and or not even, provide it, because you're not willing to just step out of that comfort zone, I guess you could say, and get to know somebody else that might be different than you or have a different perspective.
Well, and it also could be because they themselves are still fighting. You get what I'm saying? Like, remember that everybody in the spectrum is fighting for some type of respect or something, and we do feel like if we have to open the door and share this takes away from our plate. Remember,
Hmm.
the LGBT community has never been just so openly accepted. Okay?
Yep.
And so that in this in-house, we still have a false sense of instabilities that we don't have all this, that we haven't got where we need to be. So I
Hmm.
understand that to some degree, but I also ask a person to take that moment is that what you're benefiting off of just your existence, your freedom, these gay rights, because gay marriage was never nothing for me as a trans person. I'm
Hmm.
just serious.
Yep.
Um, it's off the backs of trans people. So how are we saying that we want inclusiveness and we want people to respect us if we forget the people who start this? So I think having that conversation, having people have that real dissect that real conversation of what the fear is a start. Because sometimes when
Hmm.
you we have to listening is a two-way street, okay? So
Yep.
I have to listen to their experiences and understand, and then where we can have this common ground conversation on how I'm not taking nothing from you that's not rightfully already mine.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I mean, but then we get into this purist thing. Oh, if you're white and a gay man, you can't come over here with the black gay man. Or if you white and you're a trans woman, you can't come over here with the black trans people. Oh, I'm so over that. Like I think
Yeah.
that to some degree is keeping us stagnant. Because if
Hmm.
I have met some really good people that aren't African American or POC that have helped me create not create my narrative, but share my narrative to get the things that I need to help my community without
Working
knowing
together.
anything, and not one time have they went publicly about it or anything. So I get it, yo. You have it, there's opportunities everywhere. Even it doesn't matter about your race. So let's just put that picture out there.
Yep.
Somebody's going to look for an opportunity for them to step up. It's how you govern your space and how you go about it. But I just feel like we have a false sense of what inclusion is and how we are including that with trans people. I think we think if we buy a shirt or we just get this little pink and white and blue flag and hang it up, or we come out for TDR, or if we help with just TDR, that we're being all that for trans people. No. First of all, Trans Day of Remembrance is one of the saddest days for a lot of trans people because once
Hmm.
again we have to look at a vast photograph of all our sisters and siblings that are gone. So if you
Yep.
thinking that you're coming there every year and that's in support of us, but those numbers are still getting bigger, no, that's not. That's
Yeah.
really not. Like I think every time they ask a trans person, how you feel about these trans murders, take a moment and think, say outside of yourself, I want to know, am I traumatizing this person?
Yep.
Am I
100%.
traumatizing
Absolutely.
this trans person? Or how is this question going to change her mindset right now and what she's doing? You don't know what backstory what I've had to deal with. I've listened to
Hmm.
trans murders, and especially being who I am in the community and have to help and go different avenues with trans murders here in Houston. That's exhausting. But at no point do people think how trans people feel every time we hear about trans murders. We are not out here tricking people.
Yep.
Trust me. I am. It is not my fault if a man is attracted to me,
Hmm.
and it is because masculinity is of more value for a man that my life becomes less value.
Yep.
And we have done that, even in society. Now, think about it. We do that to trans women. We do that to women in general. So, what you thought, if a black woman was low on the totem pole, you have to break ground. Imagine where a trans woman of color is at. You definitely have to dig deep to find her on the totem pole. I think we just think that it's this pretty blue and white picture, and it's not. I think that we have to be honest and wake up and say, if we're really going to be a society or a community, we need to do two things: come in unity, and that is
Yep.
true unity. And we're doing it to some degree, but then we're doing it and we're pulling our hand back real quick.
Yep. And going back to the gay marriage or just the marriage itself, that in 2015 when the Supreme Court justices ruled in favor of gay marriage, to you that wasn't a specific thing that you were looking forward to. And this is where even today when I have conversations with individuals that are straight, and they're like, hey, you got gay marriage, aren't you done? And it takes me a moment to like snap back into, like, I guess you can say a professional Anthony, compared to, like, maybe like street Anthony or whatever, or someone who's just gonna, like, say something that maybe shouldn't be. But it's one of those, like, well, you know what? That was one thing out of many that we were granted back in 2015. One thing out of many. And this is where, as a community, for me at least, we have to be able to speak when people like that individual's coming up and saying, well, you have marriage already, you have gay marriage already. We have to be able to say, look, we have the spectrum of other people in the community who don't have certain rights still. For instance, the trans community, and how they're constantly getting, killed left and right, and more specifically, the Black trans community that you hear and that you see a lot often in the news or on Facebook posts, but you don't get a lot of people responding or commenting. And I know I follow you on Facebook, and so it's one of those where you kind of keep me up to date of what's going on with that, because I just feel like I'm seeing that more often than not, and it's ridiculous. It's so sad to see, but we as individuals are not. I don't want to say all of us are not, but I don't see enough action on our side to help out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid of a lot of things. I always say that I almost feel like if people say, how do you explain your gender identity with orientation? I would say we're the blacks and the orientation is the whites.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. That is my most simplest way to put it. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, no. Maybe if you get uncomfortable hearing it, maybe you'll understand how uncomfortable it is for people that's living through it. Because yes, we're right in this moment where race is a big issue and talk. But if y'all could understand that, why that is needed and why Black Lives Matter, you definitely should understand why trans lives matter. And just because I'm trans doesn't mean my blackness is diluted because I'm trans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's just that thing. Like I said, I do feel like we're the black people to the white people, because that's what happens. And not all white people are bad, and not all white people are good, but not all black people are bad, and not all black people are good. So it's even like we want to act like it's one sided. No, it's some weight on both sides.
Yeah, that's thank you for saying that. It did need to be said, and it leads me going back to when George Floyd's protest happened, and I saw Billy Porter's Instagram post specifically talking about, if all Black lives matter, then we need to be saying Black trans lives matter as well.
That was a whole thing for me, because people kept asking me how do I feel about this. And personally, I have no problem with Black Lives Matter organization. I have the problem with the Black Lives Matter chant that black people are utilizing. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because in that chant, you are the same group of people that are saying no to black trans people, beating us, mocking us, tearing down our homes, our relationships, everything. So to me, that's where my problem came. If that organization was made for what it's made for, yes, it may be some areas it probably could have improved. But here in Houston, our Black Lives people, Ashton and Candace, and them stand up for trans people. So I'm not worried about that. I know what my Black Lives people do here in Houston. Okay. So, but mine is that problem with that chant. So you yell Black Lives Matter, but did you forget I was black and I am trans? I think that's, I asked people, you forgot I was black and I am trans. But then when they go in there, I was like, yeah, even light skin, you had a problem with me. You question my blackness because I was like, so it's problems with that. It's a bunch of stuff that goes on in-house that we need to clean up. But what I would say in reference to that Black Lives Matter, if you think that Black Lives Matter only include you and what you deem black, then that means that you're not living my life. Because
100%.
Right now, if you're going to put Black Lives Matter, yeah, I'm going to yell Black Lives do matter, because I'm black before I'm trans. I'm black before I'm 48. I'm black before I'm a parent. I'm black before everything else that come into the intersections of my identity. But if you can't see that, okay, yeah, I'm damn sure going to yell Black trans lives matter.
Yeah. And I love seeing the murals that I've seen throughout certain cities really specifically call out, Black trans lives matter. In my mind, it's very powerful. What's your take on that?
Well, I always said that it was just seeing it. It was an inspiring thing to see it. But then the the rational thinking of me and the sociologist of me is thinking is that we have been saying this so long in hashtags, t-shirts, marches, and this and that, and y'all still not getting the messages. Now we have to go even bigger and put it on billboards to yell for you to see that our lives matter. Like once again, like that to me, I'm glad it's up there and I applaud it because yes, it starts the conversations. But if y'all really were listening, and if society was really listening and really wanted to do that, we wouldn't have to do a big billboard.
Mm-hmm.
So if you offended by seeing that billboard on the side of I-10 and Greg and Waco, you need to be because you're the one those are the people that play their part in this is still being a problem.
Yep.
I mean, we don't get to walk around here blinded. We don't. Because granted, you may not like my trans experience, but who never knows? The fates might end up giving you a trans grandchild or a trans partner. Your husband or your spouse may come out and say, I'm trans, which let's not act like that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and you know what? We're seeing that more often than none now. Even in, when you look at celebrities and seeing basketball stars, families who have, really been thrust into the spotlight about their kids, transitioning, which is in my mind, it's great to see, but in some people's minds, like they're like, that doesn't need to be seen. That doesn't need to be taught. That doesn't need to be shown anywhere. Why are they, promoting this, to their kids? So there's still a lot of things.
This is why I feel like it's happening. It's sad that I always say that trans people haven't had the true chance to identify and define themselves because mainstream owns our image. I would say that what will probably change is if 10 of these hardcore rappers came out and saying, yeah, I date trans women and I enjoy them and I love them and I respect them. Then it becomes a trend setting, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with them and stuff. That's because mainstream governs how we interact with stuff. So as long as that the world and mainstream is making a mockery, if you looked at Disclosure, you'll understand what I mean when I say make a mockery of trans people in the media and mainstream. And until that is fought back by people actually acknowledging their authentic feelings for us and that they're in relationships with us, then that might change it.
Yep. 100%. Absolutely. So let me kind of pivot us to our community, Houston, right? And having some questions here around both negative as well as, very positive changes within our community. What are we still seeing that we have opportunity in? And I use opportunity in a way that we have, there's opportunity there to be fixed, right? And then what are some of the positive things that we're seeing in Houston, the fourth largest, very well diverse city in the U.S.?
Well, one thing, the work that the Houston Volunteer Lawyers and the Trans Legal Clinic are doing, and we're helping people with their name change and gender identity markers. Those are the first thing I always say, because the way you walk in the room is the way you're respected in the room. I enjoy seeing the work that people like Dee Waters have done and Monica have done in helping push policies and procedures and laws and stuff and standing up there being those spaces or changing or adding trans to the forms. Those are things that are positive, like RC and Legacy and those bringing up gender care and HRT replacement and having those conversations and stuff like that. So there are positive things that are out there because trust me, if it wasn't, I wouldn't have nowhere to navigate people. What I'm saying is that that's not enough because what is because it's such a limited amount given to those spaces get exhausted quicker. It's not, they have lawyers volunteering for name change. Imagine if 20 more lawyers came and help them, how many more people that could help? If 20 more therapists took the time to actually understand trans existence and being able to be in that space and be a good therapist for me as that person, or seeing people like me employed in those spaces to help navigate me through those spaces. That's the thing. It's little fixes that we work. We're the fourth largest city, but we're also in the South. So I'm not blinded by that.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah. We.
blinded by that. They have a problem with race. They have a problem with gender here already. So those are two things that's working against me as an individual and so many other people. The thing is be accepting where you at and knowing what you have and moving with what you got. I'm not blind about where I live. I'm not blind to what goes on around me. But do I
Mhm.
choose to let it stop me from navigating around it? No. I don't. So there are
Yeah.
some good things going on. I'm not going to always say that everybody looks for the good and the bad and things. I like to focus on the good because if that wasn't there first.
Yeah.
The fact that I have Save Our Sisters United, that's the first Black trans led nonprofit here in Houston, which is so weird to me that
Yeah.
all this it just got here. Like, why didn't people step up to help other Black trans-led orgs to get more things done, to get better and this and that, whatever? But it moves as it go. I'm just happy that I'm afforded the opportunity to do the things that I have done.
Yeah. And you actually got some good news.
Yeah. So
You want to share that?
yes, I'm always, as we know, I am a mentor by heart, but I do believe in self-investment and the people that work with you that if you invest in them and they invest in you, it's a two-way street. So I finally got the DBA and the legal papers for Save Our Sons and Brothers, but what was interesting about that is that I included the two guys that work with me doing it so that they could feel invested and feel like they had rights in something that they created. The thing is that, and their names are Renee and Kai. But the thing is that so many times we create spaces and these big agencies come and take it, or we create programs, they come and take it, and then it loses its holistic thing.
Yeah.
And I know for us as a Black person, we already have a problem with trust and pride. And then as a trans person, adding that layer into it, it
Yeah.
adds more things in there. I definitely want to keep a holistic space or arena where people can navigate and not feel like they have to just be so on guard because it's hard. And I think it feels good to see that one there's another trans person and then it's someone that is equally respected across the board in the community.
Yeah, and we'll definitely link a lot of those, everything that you just mentioned around resources and who you've been involved with.
Mhm.
We'll link all of that back within our post, so people, if anybody wants to go and check them out, they can. They have the link to all of those. But SOSB, something that I've, you know, uh, got educated on, and thank you for that. I think the two young gentlemen that I got introduced to a couple of weeks ago were amazing, and I told you that in confidence as well, or private, where I was just like, they are very young professional individuals, and I love seeing that. And I don't think we're not. That's not what people are not seeing. They're seeing things that people are thrusting on Facebook or on social media, or and not really recognizing others that are out there that are helping and that are really kind of in the shadows, I would even say.
But
Um,
there was a reason for that. I
mhm.
know that when I started SOS, it was focused on trans women, and there will always be that focus on trans women because I am a
Mhm.
trans woman. But what I started saying was that I'm going to set the example of what true inclusion is of all the trans variations under that umbrella.
Mhm.
And as trans women, we're not going to leave behind our trans siblings that exist under that umbrella. The thing
Yeah.
was that I am a strategic thinker, and felt like if I start writing that into my narrative, moving forward, it will make other people start realizing that non-binary people need to be spoken about.
Yeah.
All identities that's up under there. Like I don't want. If I could pave the way to lessen the barriers that trans women had to go through for the other one, then yeah, for the
Mhm.
other variations, I will. Trans men narratives aren't out there, but yet we're starting to see a rise in abuse and attacks on them. But nobody's talking about it. Even when Tony McDade was killed, nobody really was saying anything about it. Like I was
Yep.
like, no, and as I just no, it can't happen like that. If I am not going to sit here and preach to the orientation group, oh, don't leave us behind, and then I'm going to
Yeah.
leave trans men and non-binary people behind. No.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we have 10 minutes left, and I want to ask you one more question and then open it up to our attendees or our viewers and see if they have any questions themselves. And Marcus can actually help us guide through those questions. So while I'm asking this question, for anybody that's viewing, if y'all have any questions you would like to ask Atlantis or myself, please type that in and Marcus will get those questions to us. But the last question that I have for you, Atlantis, is really around resources. Here in Houston, we talked a lot about, we talked a little bit about what those resources look like and building on top of that. What are the resources and the goals that you and your community are needing from us now? And then what are you hoping to achieve, or where are you hoping for Houston to get to, let's say within 2021?
Well, one thing I'm always going to yell first, and I don't care who gets mad. Where's the trans shelter at? Where is there shelter for trans people? Mm-hmm. Inclusive, not just for Black trans people, not just for Hispanic, but where is that? And that has not been created by a trans person itself. That's part of the problem. There's our shelter. Mm-hmm. And then job readiness skills. And people understanding what it is with HRTs and the need for that. Whereas the having better pathways to getting people into therapy and care, because a lot goes along with this, especially if you're out there on the streets. And if you're ever in Montrose area, you see all those homeless youth, and some of them are trans, and then at night they're sleeping on the concrete outside of the place. Like, that's, to me, is terrifying as a parent and as a person. So when you ask what we need, I'll say job readiness, opening up places where there is true safety and shelter. We need people to stand up and speak up for there to be some type of protection right or discrimination clause here in Houston, because there's nothing for that for trans people. My dog has more rights protecting her than it does for trans people. I'm here in Houston. Yeah, for real. Literally, she does. Those things like that. It's an array of stuff I can't even think.
Yeah, of course.
I get caught up in the thing of housing and how there are no laws here protecting me. Mm-hmm. So to me, like, I know there are 1,000 other things, but what good does it do for me to get my name changed or to get this one? I have nowhere to live. Somebody could kick me out of my house because I'm trans if they don't want me living there. They could deny me housing.
Wow.
So it's so many things when people need to wake up, and it's like, go ask some trans people, because I'm only speaking from my experience. Go talk to other trans people. Let them tell you what they need. I'm not going to be the voice alone. I'm not going to be your cheat sheet for you to just come to me and get all the answers when there are trans people near you that you choose not to talk to or choose to ignore and act like they don't exist. So maybe that's the bittersweet way in answering my answer. But no, I feel like, hey, get out there, befriend a trans person, ask a trans person, pay attention to the conversations, join a trans group or something, find a way to be an ally. Find a be support. Come to trans events. Don't just come when it's TDOR, because I really want you to be. I really don't want to see you one time a year, and that's when it's mourning the people that we've lost.
Yep. 100. Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, we some of our viewers, probably work in some very big Fortune 500 companies here in Houston alone. My advice, if I could add on to that, is check to see what your employee resource groups are, if you have one. And if so, what does that look like specifically, not only within your own community, if you identify with, L or B or G or T and Q and plus, but it's more of like, if you see that there's no resources specifically for trans within your employer, how are you being an advocate there and saying, hey, I see resources for lesbians and gays, but what are we doing to get our bi and our trans community involved in this as well?
Imagine how powerful it would be if at least 20 of these big ERGs that have a lot of money got together with either the community center, the Montrose Center, or Legacy, or anywhere to build housing for trans people. Imagine how powerful of a statement that would be. But yeah, we'll give money to a political party. We'll give a number, like you said, to lesbian or gay, or we'll give that. But the thing is that we still are leaving people out of this. But even if you just or for people with trans experiences, because let's just
Mhm.
be honest, just there is no one way to look trans.
Yeah.
Need people to understand that we don't get to govern how you look and be trans. You could be a trans woman with a beard.
Hmm.
There's not, if you identify as trans, as a trans woman, that's what you are, and that's what you should be respected as. We
Hmm.
so much other stuff, but imagine that power of ERGs. You know, like
Oh yeah.
these. Let's put it like this: like our community centers and these orgs, Legacy and Montrose and Center, they get grants and they get funded, but there is also fundraising that they do. You know, if
Hmm.
you feel like that you want to come in and be this big trans ally and help them build up there, go talk to them and say, how can we help create this program for trans people?
Yeah.
Because that's there. It's not like these conversations can't happen. I think that what they're not, people don't want to have them because then they be like, oh, this is too complicated. This is too difficult. What about the backlash? Because think about it. Also, people don't want their reputation ruined or have to deal with all the naysay that comes around trans people. But as a
Hmm.
trans person, I live through it every day. With people
Yeah.
saying what they could say. If I could take it in my little old being, you as a ERG could take it as a big org. No.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, well, before we sign off, I'm going to bring Marcus in so he can let us know if there's any questions within the chat. Marcus?
Hey, good evening, everybody. What a great evening to kick off here for Luminaris to have such a great discussion and such an important discussion. We've got one question in the chat. That is, what emotional advice would you give to someone who is starting out looking for trans community support? Atlantis?
Ask, open, talk to your people, your support group. The thing is that none of this stuff I know the answer to. I figured out on myself. Unfortunately, I had a lot of gay men around me and lesbian women and heterosexual women and men around me that they didn't even know what the word trans was, but when it got to the thing of needing resources and services, I spoke out loud in my social groups, and we
Hmm.
started looking for it as a group. The thing is that you don't know who knows who if you only keep it to yourself. So
Yeah.
somebody might be needing it by Anthony, and if they don't ever say, "Hey, I'm trans and I'm looking for experience," they don't. They're not even giving Anthony the credit that he may know somebody because he's a gay man. We have
Hmm.
to stop thinking that only trans people could guide us to some support and services because that's just not true.
Yep. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Marcus, any other questions?
No, that's it right now. If anyone else does have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We're still here for another 2 minutes, and we'll be happy to take them. A reminder that everybody who's viewing right now, this will be available for video on demand afterwards. We'll post it in the next couple days on the Luminaris page and the Save Our Sisters.
And save our
Excellent.
sons.
And save our sons
Save
and
Our Sons.
brothers.
Sorry, my bad. Sorry.
Yeah, you go.
Save our
Yeah,
sons.
you go.
Let's not forget about them. I'm going to be adamant about that, and I hope as y'all progress through your days that you're adamant about what about trans men? What about
Hmm.
non-binary? We're not
Hmm.
doing that. Like right now, we're here in trans and we're talking about trans, but we have to understand that there are siblings under this umbrella that exist with us and are suffering
Yeah,
and dealing with the same stuff.
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Atlantis. Again, my dear friend. I know this. I've been in talks with you and communication with you for a while now, but I think this. I was kind of I don't know why I was so nervous, but I was just nervous just to have a simple conversation, not a simple conversation, but a conversation with you about such a big topic like this, and just educating me. I think I'm leaving this conversation thinking how else I can do, what else I can do more than on top of everything else that I'm involved in. How else can I push that and just say, you know what? We have more resources. Why not include them into these resources and ensure that they're getting a good chunk of the pie, because everybody else has resources coming in like left and right, but it's more of the community that we don't often talk about that doesn't get a lot of the resources.
Well, I'm going to say what you just said was nervous and you don't know why you felt this way trying to have this conversation. A lot of people feel that way. We always fear the things that that's unknown or that may be difficult. So the thing is that walking through that difficulty, it's
Mhm.
the thing is that if we have been seen and labeled as deviants of society, and this is so difficult to get along with. When all truth is, just sit and talk to us. We're regular people.
Mhm.
We pay our
Mhm.
bills the same way. I don't see my bill saying, "Okay, here go my trans dollars. Pay my light
Yeah,
bill, trans light bill." Like I don't. It's no separation. So if you don't see a separation in my bills and money, don't separate me in society.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you again so much. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so excited to continue on our relationship here and our partnership with both Luminaris and SOS and SOSB. So, again, one more time, everyone, Atlantis, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, that is it. And thank y'all for joining us. And we will have another happy hour next month. So definitely like and subscribe and follow us both on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the social media. And same thing with Atlantis, with SOS and SOSB. They're on all the social media as well. We'll be putting all the links and the contact information down below. And for everyone to go through and just check them out. But again, now you know someone. If you didn't know someone before within the trans community, now you know someone who's as fabulous and amazing as I would like to think myself. But you never know. I don't know. But again, thank you all. Have a great night. Talk to y'all later. Bye.